The following half-hour show is a paid political program and is not endorsed by this station, management, or staff.
The following program is sponsored by Excalibur Insurance Management Services.
As we took time out this past weekend to properly honor our military personnel who bravely gave their lives to keep our freedoms, we are proud to feature as guests two men, one of whom has dedicated his life to veterans issues, and the other who has prioritized and gained national recognition for his activism investigating individuals who have made false claims of military service. Sitting with me in studio today is former President Judge of Lackawanna County and Vietnam veteran Thomas Munley, the recipient of the Bronze Star for Meritorious Service, who has been a veterans advocate since he was discharged from the Army more than 4 decades ago. Joining us by satellite is former Navy SEAL Don Shipley. Shipley served on several SEAL teams, including Underwater Demolition and Navy Special Warfare Group 2, as a SEAL Advanced Training Instructor. As a SEAL, Mr. Shipley conducted operations in Bosnia and Liberia. He served in 8 SEAL platoons, was platoon chief in 5 of those, and was awarded the Navy and Marine Corps Medal for heroism during search and rescue missions, as well as many other medals for bravery, too numerous to list here. After 24 years of Navy service, he retired as a senior chief petty officer. He has also been deployed as an explosive expert, instructing police departments across the country in booby traps and improvised explosive devices. He and his wife Diane have gained national attention, appearing on numerous television shows, including Inside Edition, for outing individuals suspected of false claims of military service. We look forward to a good show today.
This is the Volpe Report, a weekly news and political interview show examining the latest local, state, and national issues with Chuck Volpe. Insightful, informative, controversial. The area's premier political talk show, the Volpe Report.
Don, welcome to the Volpe Report.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm flattered to be here. I've done a bit with Fox News before, and always a pleasure. I got my start with Fox News.
Well, that's a great thing to hear. And Judge, my good friend, former President Judge, now Senior Judge, Tom Munley. But Judge, I want to turn it over to you now to talk to John and our viewing audience to kind of introduce Don to them.
Thank you very much, Chuck. And thank you for letting us be on the show. But I want to say something about Don Shipley. I've been following Don Shipley on YouTube for years now. He I watch him every single night. I know every one of his shows, and I know the people that he exposes. Don Shipley is a Navy SEAL. He exposes phony people who say they were in the service. I'm just happy to be here to introduce him, because when I called him a couple months ago, he agreed to do the show, and I am so honored that he's here.
What led you to become a Navy SEAL, and what were your, let's say, highlights of your career?
I remember asking somebody, I met my wife on a Navy ship. She was a sailor also. And when we got married, one of us had to leave the ship. And I got stationed in Coronado, California in 1984. And I remember asking some guy, I was like, who are those guys? They're in these green, big Mae West K-Pop life jackets. They're shuffling around, hurt, banged up, swollen faces. And he was like, those are Navy SEALs. Well, they were students going to the Navy, so I'd never even heard of it. And back then, nobody knew what a SEAL was. You know, it's an everyday term now, but I found out they used machine guns and explosives, and I was like, sign me up, you know. So I said, I'll give that a try. And I just went into it just like that. I loved every bit of the Navy. I figured if I didn't make it through this training, like my chances of doing it were just slim, like everybody else's, that I'd have been the happiest little bud's quitter ever. I'd have just gone back to the fleet and sailed the 7 seas.
Right.
But it worked out, and I got through the...
So you're in the elite of the elite class of human beings, Don, that were able to actually survive the training. And, you know, I was a big Steven Seagal fan, and he, I thought, brought a great honor to that type of profession in service of our country, even though he wasn't one. He's about an 8th degree black belt in martial arts. He's pretty good himself in fighting skills. But his portrayal of a Navy SEAL in some of the movies he made, Under Siege and Under Siege 2, Dark Territory. I saw both of them, but I thought he brought great honor. If this is what a SEAL is, wow. But your comments.
Well, I'll tell you, I watch every bad war movie, good and bad war movie out there, and Under Siege is one of them. And I'm not saying it's a bad movie, but I'm forced to watch all of them because so many of these phonies tell stories based off that. If I hear one more guy claim that he punched his commanding officer in the face, he's getting that right from Steven Seagal, and that's how he was discharged. I've never seen anybody even look cross-eyed at an officer in the military, let alone punch one. But the training we went through is, it was. We have a saying that everybody wants to be a SEAL on a sunny day. And when you get there, see, you never know what you're going to get. You can watch all the movies about BUD/S training and read all the books about SEALs, but until you walk into the gladiatorial pits in San Diego, the arena, you'll never know. And I really had a good time. I was just cut for it. It was terrible hard, and I suffered like everybody else, but I was just not going to show weakness in front of those guys I respected so much. So as bad as it was, I knew that I was going to get warm again. I knew I was going to eat again. I knew I was going to sleep again. And a lot of guys just could not put that in their head. It's so bad right now. I'm out of here. I'm going to leave. And a lot of guys that would have been good SEALs just made that decision on a whim, just a moment of weakness that shot into their head. I didn't have any trouble. I never thought about quitting. I just got through. And then, when you get the SEAL team, you talk about, the dangers and the rigors of all that, but you're surrounded by guys who are all into it. Right. This is going to be bad. We know it is, but we're going to have a good story at the end of it. And you are trained for that. The extensive training, and even in SEAL training, no matter what the evolution is, these are instructors that are teaching you how to do it. And most guys are just watching their lips move. They're so worried and wrapped up about what's about to happen, they can't focus on the instruction. And I was always able to do that, and I just had a great time. If you're teaching, I'm going to learn this thing. And if they want you to get through training, they're going to get you through. They'll help you. They're not this. SEAL instructors are there to make you SEALs. You just have to be receptive to the training.
They have a week, Chuck, called Hell Week when you're in the Navy SEALs. And for 5.5 days or whatever it is, you sleep for 4 hours. Wow. I don't know how a human being can do that. Don, how did you get through that, sleeping 4 hours in 5.5 days?
That's that new wave sissy stuff they're doing out there. I remember going to sleep twice for 15 minutes at a time. Wow. And what they would do is they would put our boats up. We'd have the rubber boats. We'd prop the oars underneath it. And they tell us to get underneath there and go to sleep. And we would dive underneath those boats, and they would let us, we're on the beach, it's cold. They would let us get into that deep REM sleep for about 15 minutes. And buddy, they'd wake us up and tell us to get in that water with those bullhorns and explosions. Get back out in that cold water. And when you did, you would turn around and look at all the guys that were standing back on the beach. I'm not going out there. And so, just separate, it never got cold enough for me, I guess. I knew I was going to get warm. But, we had, I tell you, and what they're doing now with that is some doctor, Navy doctor, physician said we need to do this for those guys. It's worse. Getting 4 hours of sleep is worse than getting 15 minutes.
Wow.
Chuck, I want to tell you, his son is a Navy SEAL who was injured in combat, his own son.
Wow. So you have a son that's a Navy SEAL. I've got to believe you're already in the rarest air for your own involvement. Having a son, I've got to believe that's in the even rarer air than that.
Yes, it is. The legacies, they're notoriously hard on the legacies at BUD/S. My son had a good one. He went to SEAL training, and he had it bad because everybody knew me. And they knew the reputation of legacies, which just because your dad did it doesn't mean you're going to do it. And usually, I hate for it to sound like this, but I'm only putting it in perspective. It's perhaps the watering down of mama. as the boy is being raised. And my wife was tough. I mean, really tough. She was independent, a whole bit. But some of the guys are gone so much. I was gone 9 months, 10 months out of the year sometimes. These endless deployments. So mama has to raise him, and if she batters his butt up a little bit and doesn't man him up, But
understood.
My son made it through, and most don't. Most do not.
We're going to talk about what your vocation is now and what you've been doing and how it affects not only your life, but the military and its reputation generally. So we'll take this quick break and come right back. I've been hitting for some time the ignorance, spurious scholarship, intellectual dishonesty, and hypocrisy of the progressive left. The problem with their collective cultural lie, like all lies, eventually gets found out. It is rare, however, that one single event could lay waste to much of the lies and hypocrisy of the cultural wars embraced and fueled by the progressive left. That event took place recently, the despicable terrorist attack by Hamas against Israel and its citizens. Hamas murdered and raped old and infirm women and men and beheaded innocent children, which they taped. Hamas, despite their defenders' attempts to blame Israel, is just one type of several verminous stains on the human race. But I will not waste another breath on them. However, their actions have laid bare the intellectual rot of the left. You remember this despicable and racist murder of George Floyd, as we all do, by the racist police officer Derek Chauvin, who was properly convicted of murder. But on the other hand, we were told by the leftists and the proponents of critical race theory that all white police officers were racist. It was systemic. There were cries to defund all the police because they were all racist. A movement arose, Black Lives Matter. And God forbid anybody tempered the ridiculous extremist lie by saying, all lives matter. Any such utterance was met with contempt, cancellation, and screams of racism by social justice warriors. Our very own Governor Tom Wolf attended a Black Lives Matter rally, which would have been okay, except that he had told everyone else to shutter in home, and he shut down thousands of businesses that would never return. He even forbid church services and wouldn't let family members visit dying relatives in the hospital. Yet there he stood next to hundreds of protesters, many wearing shirts that read, "Blue Lives Kill." However, when Jewish babies were beheaded and their mothers raped and murdered, and Israeli citizens and millions of Jewish Americans demanded justice, where were the social justice warriors and BLM proponents then? They were calling for temperance and restraint. They said, don't smear all Palestinians by the actions of Hamas. And you'll love this irony, because they actually claimed all lives matter. Now apparently it's okay to say that. Also, it is important not to forget all the social justice warriors being spewed out of our universities, who are being indoctrinated by our own woke commissars in academia, with the complicity of their DEI departments. You remember them, diversity, equity, and inclusion miscreants. You remember how tenured professors were fired for alleged insensitivity. You remember judges being booed or screamed at off campuses. God forbid there might be trigger warnings or microaggressions that might offend marginalized identity groups on campus. The First Amendment had no place on campus for any speech that might upset one of those groups. Then we saw the disgraceful protests on many of our college campuses that were anti-Semitic and actually justified violence against Jews. Apparently, white macroaggressions are okay, since Jewish students are not a marginalized identity group. Those protesting students actually claimed Israel was to blame because they were an oppressor, and the atrocities were a justifiable expression of oppressed peoples. The same college administrators that were firing professors and canceling speeches now justified such protests, claiming First Amendment guarantees free speech on campus. Wow. The hypocrisy knows no shame. Apparently, DEI departments will countenance trigger warnings and microaggressions as long as they are initiated by marginalized groups against white people, as Jewish Americans are. And how about the disgraceful members of the United States Democratic Caucus's squad? You know, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Jamal Bowman, Cori Bush, Pramila Jayapal, and Summer Lee, to name just a few. And their despicable attempts to justify the slaughter by blaming Israel apartheid and oppression. Rashida Tlaib went so far that she hung a Palestinian flag outside her office in Congress and actually used the phrase, "from the river to the sea," which is code for the extermination of all Jews living in Israel. Now that you've heard some of my opinions, I will now quote from other members in the media who are as outraged as me. The first is a quote from Bret Stephens, the Jewish award-winning journalist of the New York Times, who took his own newspaper, the Times, to task for their initial reporting that had blamed Israel for the destruction of a hospital in Gaza, that U.S. intelligence actually established was fired by Hamas-controlled territory from the Gaza Strip. Israel had nothing to do with it. Now I'll begin his quote. What was October 8th? Question. It wasn't just a day after the single greatest atrocity against Jews since the Holocaust, an atrocity whose details were impossible to miss because the perpetrators made sure to film them. It was the day the atrocity was celebrated, not just in places like Tehran, but also on the streets of Manhattan and on too many college campuses. And it was a day in which, on October 8th, Jews woke up to discover who our friends are not. Our friends are not those members of the Black Lives Matter movement, whose stickers and lawn signs so many American Jews posted in allyship after George Floyd's murder, who celebrated October 7th with a post extolling the Hamas paragliders who slaughtered Jews at a music festival. Black Lives Matter chapters later apologized for the since-deleted post, but the apology isn't accepted. They knew what they were doing. Our friends are not at universities, where every third building seems to be named for a Jewish benefactor. Schools like Stanford, which now defends the rights of students to chant "from the river to the sea," a call for the annihilation of the entire state, on free speech grounds, are often the same places that, only recently, barred a student from campus for a racist social media post. Free speech is fine as a standard, not as a double standard. Our friends are not those in academic and corporate DEI offices or the diversity trainers who think that Jews don't count as a minority. Diversity that thinks only of race is anti-diversity. End quote. Now I will quote from a letter to the editor that appeared in the Scranton Times by Adele Koschenbach. Begin quote. Most Americans are shocked and incredulous at the alarming number of university protesters who seem to be celebrating terrorism and expressing ugly and blatant anti-Semitism. Why such fanatical hatred? Question. In part, it's what our colleges are teaching. The DEI programs at our schools have ramped up the anti-Semitism on too many of our campuses. Dr. Tabia Lee, the former Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Director at De Anza Community College in California, wrote in a letter to the Wall Street Journal. Now this is a quote within the quote from the doctor. I was repeatedly told that fighting anti-Semitism and promoting Jewish inclusion don't matter. Why? Because Jews are white oppressors, and it was our job to decenter whiteness. Such racist language reflects an obsession with dividing people on different racial groups into categories of oppressor and oppressed. Now back to Ms. Aschenbach's column. Lee's colleagues on other campuses saw similar experiences and concurred that schools captured by DEI agendas stroke hatred toward Israel and, more concerning, toward individual Jews. Lee was fired because she created a program for all students, including Jews. End quote. And finally, I will quote from an editorial in the Washington Examiner by Nicholas Claremont. His editorial was entitled, "What Left-Wing Ideology Has Wrought," subtitled, "Progressivism's Predictable Turn Against Jews Was a Long Time Coming." I will now quote from Mr. Claremont, begin quote. "We have now been living with, or arguably even under, the ideology called social justice or wokeness for a decade. Over the past few weeks, however, many decent people who previously downplayed the seriousness of the problem have noticed something others among us have worried about for a long time. During the decade of woke ascendancy, radical ideas and lingo from members of the far left were broadly adopted by powerful and wealthy elites in order to further their social status, by posing as more dedicated and edgy than they really were. It was a society-wide version of what had happened in university departments. As Roger Kimball described in his classic book, Tenured Radicals, originally published in 1990, which showed how schools like Columbia University had dedicated much of their curricular energy to the departments of the theory disciplines. Practitioners in these disciplines broke the rules of liberal discourse, freeing them to make up claims that strained basic common sense and moral decency. Since I withdrew my participation in the left over the sheer stupidity and danger of woke ideas that were proliferating some years ago, I have never seen anyone persuaded until it becomes their problem. People deny the sweeping, dangerous changes have taken place until some particular example drives home the point that there is something deeply destructive and anti-intellectual and manipulative abroad in the culture, that it travels under the banner of the left, and it is usually able to convince decent people of indecent things by making it fashionable to use slogans and buzzwords and cliches to manipulate the public vocabulary. We have all heard enough theory, abstraction, and jargon from the left. At a certain point, it is time to develop an ear for terms like this from the left's radical and academic worlds. And when you do hear them, hear only alarms." End quote. It is tragic that it took the butchering of innocent civilians and children for the progressive left to realize what they have countenanced with their virtue signaling. Don, I want to talk now a little bit in this half of the show, what you've committed a lot of your life's work to, call it a vocation, if you will. It involves, we're going to talk about stolen valor, and we're going to talk about, you actually did apparently videos on YouTube, Phony Navy SEAL of the Week, but tell a little bit of the folks out there in the audience what it's all about.
Well, the FBI has its stolen valor guys, and I deal with them. But the FBI doesn't have the SEAL database. The FBI isn't being sent SEAL requests to verify them. So the FBI threw something together. I don't even know how they got the statistics, and came out years ago and said for every living SEAL, there are 300 imposters. And there's over 1,000 on the volume that I get. And I'm the guy that has you don't have any, how would you verify a SEAL? The CIA can't do it. The FBI can't do it. The only one who can do it is right here with SEAL database or Naval Special Warfare Command. To put it in perspective, Budweiser did a study with bartenders throughout the country a few years back and asked them a series of questions. They asked them, what's the biggest lie you hear people tell at a bar? And Navy SEAL, I was a Navy SEAL, was number one. Wow. And so, you're always going to find those guys swilling a Schlitz at the end of the bar, just being obnoxious there. But I go after the ones that are really, I'll never get rid of those guys. I go after the ones that really do a lot of damage. And certainly on this Veterans Day, these guys that just cheat people and cheat charities, and they fraud and they deceive, and they leave such a bad impression on people. I've had numbers of people contact me and go, I'm so relieved to find out finally that he was a fake Navy SEAL, because I just thought how terrible and despicable you guys are to have somebody like that in your ranks. Wow. They're violent, ill-tempered, just disturbed, but they know what they're doing. Right. And just talking about killing people. That's what they do, and they intimidate. I just got off the phone with a woman whose neighbor deliberately scares her, staring at her, and claims to be a SEAL, and I just cleaned all that up. So there's only 3 times a person is going to tell you they're a Navy SEAL when they're not. That's to build trust is a really big, it's the guy that's going to roof your house, pave your driveway, the car salesman. They're building trust using that I'm a Navy SEAL. And it does, it builds trust. And then you get it, and you're going to get it, but good from those guys. The other one is an underachieving clown his whole life, and he uses it to gain respect, to get people to buy him beers and oodle over him about being a SEAL. But the third one is to intimidate people. I can kill you with a rolled up newspaper, a plastic spoon, and it scares people.
Sure.
And I deal with numerous law enforcement, U.S. Marshals that are transporting a guy that will contact me and go, "We've heard this guy's a SEAL. Is he?" No, he's not. They're not afraid of him, but they take precaution.
Sure.
I've dealt in a number of FBI hostage standoffs and police standoffs. The neighbor says that guy in that house barricade is a Navy SEAL, and they'll call me right on the spot. And no, he's not. So it's tough out there with these clowns.
Well, if you're a Navy SEAL and fought and risked your life for our country, that would convey that sort of trust that would open doors, and that's, I'm guessing, why you do it.
Well, this goes back throughout history. This is the problem. There were phonies at Gettysburg, guys telling, I was at Valley Forge, I was at Gettysburg. But they could only project it down a few bar stools at their local pub. And this ever. Now, with the age of the internet, they can be anyone they want to be, anywhere they want to be. And that's the problem. You have to combat that by fighting fire with fire. And I've had a lot of problems with that. I enjoy a good fight, though. So YouTube dishonorably discharged me a few years back, and I made a comeback for I hated that guy so bad, and I just threw all his personal information up there to let people know he's a phony. Now, a Navy commander contacted me yesterday for a posting I put up on the internet. This guy is the head of security at this big church that he goes to. And that's important in this day and time. That guy spent 31 days in the Navy before they booted him out. He was never a SEAL. He was never any of this. And luckily, he stumbled on me. We already had the guy's records. But it's stuff like that. So it's not only this harmless boasting and loudmouth things that go on and ripping people off. It becomes downright dangerous with some of these claims these guys do and how they can squeak through the cracks and become the head of security for some really big stuff. But I think I've been doing this for 13 years, 12. And I just went over 50,000 fake Navy SEAL. 50,000. Wow.
And if I could say something, Chuck, he gets threatened a lot.
I can imagine.
People threaten him, and he always tells me, "Come on, here, you know where I live. Come on." Now, me at my age, I'd be scared if somebody threatened me. I'll be honest with you. Not him. Yeah. Come on, you know where I live. Some people say I'm going to beat you up. I'm going to do the Don says, "Come on, let's go."
Well, after what you've been through in your life, protecting our country and risking your life every day, the training you had to endure, I'm pretty sure you don't lose any sleep at night worrying about some phony confronting you, Don.
Well, you have to read people, and I'm very good at reading a threat. Now, I'll take a threat when a threat is there for that. But one of the first things phonies do when you confront them, and I just if you ask me if Bob Smith was ever a Navy SEAL, I'm going to check his name in this database, an 80-year history, 1943. His name isn't listed. I'm going to send you a letter back. But sometimes it goes past that. And the first thing they do is call out a legal threat. I'm going to sue you. No, when people hear that word lawyer and lawsuit, it really gets their attention. But, when you confront somebody, that's the first thing they go to. Right. And then they start the threats, and they're just little keyboard weenies hiding behind a camera. Yeah. That's scaring me, man. And they never have done anything. The closest I came was in a Walmart parking lot. I got after one, and he framed opening the door of his car. Yeah. And when I didn't flinch, he peeled off. So no teeth, none.
It was extraordinary reading about what you're doing, Don, and what you have done for our country and continue to do. Thank you.